We are now 9 days from the general election, and interest is running high. Early voting is underway, and this week, NBC5 broadcast another live debate with the major party candidates for Vermont's lone seat in the House of Representatives. Now, we tried to arrange a traditional debate in northern New York's congressional race as well. Republican Elise Stefanik is facing a challenge from Democrat Matt Castelli. But arrangements haven't been easy. For weeks, starting in early September, in writing and by phone, we asked the Stefanik campaign for any dates that worked for her schedule. She offered none. We got no response. A few days ago, we picked one, still heard nothing, until we pressed the Congresswoman at her GOP rally in Saranac Lake last weekend.
Why haven't you taken a debate with Matt Castelli?
Well, I'll put it back to you, your station. I've debated more than any other candidate in modern history in this district. It is unacceptable that the media has allowed there to be a primary with no Democrat debate.
Okay, I'm going to make one last question. Why? We've never got a return of a phone call. We never got a return of an email.
We're in communication with your station all the time, but what your viewers should know is that your station went ahead and scheduled a debate on a date that I'm in Herkimer County and have been committed to being a keynote speaker at a dinner and a special guest at a lunch. Shame on your station for agreeing to the terms with the Democrat opponent. We are in discussions with multiple outlets that cover the majority of the district when it comes to having a debate.
Still in discussions. Also, NBC5 has not held a primary debate in her district. Maybe she's confusing us with someone else. We picked this week's debate for a debate after, as we say, weeks with no response from her campaign because voters want to see candidates side by side discussing the issues of the day. You've told us so. Sharon Sykes, writing NBC5 to say, I'm most disappointed that Stefanik has refused to debate Castelli. Televised debates, she said, are an excellent way to educate the electorate about the positions of each candidate. Margaret Winship said, our district, the largest in New York, like many rural areas, struggles with bread and butter issues and needs good leadership. If Ms. Stefanik refuses, please consider scheduling Mr. Castelli alone. Wendy Schaefer, who called herself a registered Republican, echoed that, saying this is an extremely important race, end quote. So we arranged a venue, invited them both, same terms as our Vermont debates. The event held Thursday at the West Side Ballroom in Plattsburgh. Castelli was there. Unfortunately, Stefanik was not. But hours before her scheduled dinner, we noticed her tweet celebrating her appearance at the grand opening of a new Chick-fil-A fast food restaurant in Watertown. We proceeded without her. Thank you for coming in. We are, of course, sorry that Representative Stefanik would not agree to a debate or a date, but thank you for being here. I want to ask you, before we get to some issue questions, tell me your story.
Great. Thank you, Stuart. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. So I'm Matt Castelli. I'm running for Congress. Born and raised in upstate New York in a bipartisan household. Dad's the Democrat, Mom's the Republican. And maybe it's not a surprise that for much of my life, I was an independent. My parents taught me the value of service to others. And so when I was at Siena College, 9/11 happened. It put me on a path to serve my country. I joined the CIA not long after that and led teams hunting down some of the world's most dangerous terrorists, served in Afghanistan and Iraq. I served in the Obama and Trump White Houses as the director for counterterrorism, because when it comes to our safety, security, and strength, it means putting country before party. My belief in that has never wavered. When we saw the attack on January 6th, I knew I needed to step up and serve once more. When we watched Congresswoman Stefanik really sell out our country in order to advance her own career, we launched this campaign to fight and to protect our democracy. And as I've been traveling all across New York 21, we've had the opportunity to speak with folks. Folks are concerned, I think, about the divisiveness and the extremism that they're seeing, and they want a moderate, someone who's going to bring us together to solve problems. And I think folks are also concerned about wanting a representative who shows up. And we've been doing that all throughout the course of this campaign. I know folks are going to be quite disappointed that Congresswoman Stefanik didn't show up tonight to talk about the opportunities for our future, to talk about her plans or record of failure, because it really is all about accountability.
Well, we thought that some discourse was better than none. So let me ask you about some of the issues that poll very high in New York State and across the country, starting with the democracy itself. Yeah. Do you believe in the integrity of U.S. elections today? What do you say to those who feel the 2020 election was fraudulent?
We had a free and fair election. Those who would promote the big lie, unfortunately, we saw many of them. Unfortunately, Congresswoman Stefanik was one of them. Even to this day, she doesn't acknowledge the validity and the results of the 2020 election. These election deniers, they undermine our democracy. And it was that big lie that led to the events of January 6th. The lies that we saw from Congresswoman Stefanik led to the deaths of 5 police officers and injuries of over 140. It was disastrous. And it's something where they attempted to overturn the results of a free and fair election. They attempted to overthrow our government. And that's something that we really need to acknowledge is still on the ballot. There's still an ongoing threat to our democracy.
Do you think the former president should be criminally charged based on what you know now?
I think we'll leave that up to the Department of Justice and allow their ongoing investigation to continue. I think the transparency that we've received to a certain degree from the January 6th hearings has given us tremendous insight, largely coming from Republicans and those within the former president's inner circle about their plans to overturn the election. It was clear that it was an effort, a violent insurrection to overthrow our government. There were criminal activities that certainly were conducted. People are going to jail already in support of those who provided support to the January 6th violent insurrection.
Inflation is the #1 issue this year. What could the next Congress do to try to help? And do you agree with the Fed strategy to raise interest rates, even if it means paying higher interest rates, perhaps rising unemployment?
Yeah, well, this is an area where I have been critical of the Biden administration. I think they were too slow to act in terms of acting to address inflation with interest rates as they rise up. That's a classic approach to addressing inflation. You want to cool some things down, but they were too slow to act because they were too slow to recognize it wasn't transitory. I think the approach is to recognize that there are rising costs for daily life for a lot of folks. And the concept of inflation gets a little esoteric. Let's bring it back down to the practical implications. The cost for healthcare and prescription drugs, the cost for housing and childcare. There are solutions that can be brought to bear on any number of these issues by focusing on the supply side of this challenge. That's where inflation comes, an imbalance of supply and demand.
Did Congress overspend? Republicans trace all of this to the spending over the last couple of years during the pandemic.
Yeah, so people like Congresswoman Stefanik, we hear that argument from her if she might want a refund on her Harvard education because she's got the economics wrong on that. We see inflation on a global basis. There's nothing that we did uniquely in the United States that causes inflation in the UK or elsewhere in Europe. What we need to recognize is that the pandemic cratered all of our economies, the demand and the supply side. Our demand came back up, but the supply side didn't. That's what causes prices to increase. It's a sort of traditional supply and demand curve. We need to focus on supply side solutions to fix our supply chain, to make sure that it begins and ends here at home. There are a lot of opportunities if we bring forward those common sense solutions. But the challenge that we have in front of us is that the proposal with a misdiagnosis of what the problem is that we hear from folks like Congresswoman Stefanik is actually to destroy our economy because the pain is the point for them. They want to destroy our economy. They've already opposed those common sense solutions to actually address inflation. And we're seeing now this effort and proposals to cut federal spending. In our district, in the 21st, that would have disastrous consequences. It would cut federal spending that we rely on. Cops and nurses are going to lose their jobs. We're going to have rural health care services that are going to be slashed. Broadband and infrastructure projects are going to stop, and they're already starting to talk about gutting Medicare and Social Security. So the plan that we see from Congresswoman Stefanik and others would be disastrous for our economy and disastrous for our district.
Energy for a moment.
Yeah.
It's lost on no one when we've seen $5 gas in recent months. And the Republicans say they have a package of bills ready to go if Republicans take control of Congress that would juice up domestic oil and gas production. That a good idea? Do you favor really leaning on the industry to improve, to expand domestic production?
Well, listen, I've put about 60,000 miles on my truck throughout the course of this campaign. I'm paying for all of those fill-ups out of my own pocket, so I understand the pain at the pump that many people are facing. But the challenge that we see here is also tied to the fact that we're seeing price hikes from big oil. They have record profits right now.
Do you want a windfall profits tax?
Well, what we need, I think, is to make sure that we're stopping the price gouging. And I think that there are opportunities to prevent that. I think Shell just reported astronomical profits just in this last quarter. And Congresswoman Stefanik, who's a big benefactor from the big oil and gas industry, she's helping them hold us hostage to those price hikes that we're seeing. So there are a lot of opportunities there. What we also need to recognize is where this problem originated. It also dates back to the pandemic, when we saw both demand for oil and gas crater as well as production. But the production was cut when former President Trump, in collusion with Russia and OPEC, made a decision to cut production. Production never came back because they recognized that if they keep production low, they can keep prices high. We need to fix that. And yes, a part of that solution is going to be expanding in whatever way, shape, or form we can to increase domestic production. But right now, it's not clear that there's anything that the government is or is not doing that is preventing big oil from increasing production. They're enjoying those profits. We need to force them to increase a little bit of production, but to avoid being held hostage in such a situation as we are right now from ever happening again, we need to diversify our energy sector. And that means investments in alternatives.
The national debt is now in excess of $31 trillion. That's a lot of zeros.
No.
It's gotten a lot worse in the last 4 or 5 years.
No.
Is 31 trillion a problem? Do you think that it's time, and would you commit to, if you want to increase spending, you should raise taxes. If you want to cut taxes, you should cut spending.
Yeah, we need to seriously take our fiscal responsibility seriously, and that's something that I am committed to doing. What we see is an unsustainable path in terms of both deficits and debt. Now, this administration, to their credit, have cut deficits after they were significantly increased by the prior administration. But we need to address our long-term debt. Some of that's tied to making sure that a lot of our long-term programs are solvent in fixing those issues. But one of the byproducts is, the tax plans that we've seen in the past, trickle-down economics, where we gave a tax benefit to the ultra wealthy and corporations with this expectation that somehow that they would handle many of the needs within our communities. And for the last 4 decades, both parties have been to blame for pushing forward those kinds of policies. We need to make sure that the ultra wealthy and corporations are paying their fair share so we can address many of these issues and reduce the debt.
We will have more with Matt Castelli challenging Republican Elise Stefanik for Northern New York seat in Congress in a moment. We'll continue our interview with U.S. House candidate Matt Castelli. He's the Democratic nominee in New York's 21st Congressional District, which is most of northern New York. A reminder, we pushed for weeks for a broadcast debate inviting Republican incumbent Elise Stefanik. She did not respond to our invitations, so we went ahead without her. Let me ask you about Ukraine.
Yeah.
Kevin McCarthy could be Speaker of the House, and this week suggested that with Republicans in control, America might pull back on its support for Ukraine during this war. Do you support continuation of America's alliance and financial support of Ukraine for as long as it takes?
Well, absolutely. We need to commit to providing support to Ukraine in defense of their democracy. Defending democracy abroad helps us defend democracy here at home. We need to make sure we're doing so in consultation and partnership with our NATO allies and European partners. And this administration has done a tremendous job of making sure that that has happened. Ukraine is winning this war as a byproduct of the support they've received from the United States. But you've highlighted a big danger that we've started to see from Kevin McCarthy and Elise Stefanik. She's their messaging chief, and she's allowed for this rise of a pro-Putin faction within the Republican Party. People who are undermining even our commitment to NATO, which has ensured North Atlantic national security for the last 75 years. We need to make sure we're pushing back against these threats, not just to our democracy, but across the globe. In New York 21, we have a proud tradition of standing up for the United States of America, combating Russia, and we need to continue to be on Team USA.
Let me ask you about crime and guns. First, your commitment to the Second Amendment and whether you would support, as many in your party would, restoration of semi-automatic assault-style weapons ban in our country.
So I'm a gun owner. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, sworn oath to the Constitution. The Second Amendment is not going anywhere under my watch. I need us to, I think, be very clear in terms of what it is we're looking at. I've opposed and continue to oppose an assault weapons ban because I don't think it solves the problem facing us right now. we see in the aftermath of these terrible, tragic events in Uvalde, Texas, and recognize that we have a moment of urgency because gun violence is the #1 cause of death of children in America right now. We need to bring to bear common sense solutions that allow us to reduce the rates of gun violence, keep our kids and communities safe. That's an opportunity for us to come together. And many of us who are law-abiding gun owners who support the Second Amendment agree around common sense solutions, universal background checks, empowering our law enforcement with the tools that are necessary to keep any firearm out of the hands of somebody that's going to do themselves or others harm. But the real difference in this race is we have someone on the far right who's actually married to the gun lobby, who's working tirelessly to make sure that every cop killer, kid killer, domestic abuser, and terrorist has unfettered access to whatever firearms they choose to terrorize our communities. Parents cannot trust Congresswoman Stefanik to keep their kids safe from being slaughtered in our schools.
Health insurance premiums are going up in the new year. Do you think that the country is moving toward a Medicare for all system? And do you think that's a good idea?
I don't think we're moving toward it. I don't think it's a good idea, but I would support a public option. I think we need to give people an option for their health care. And I think having a competitive driver of a publicly funded insurance would be an opportunity for us to reduce many of those costs. But folks work hard for their insurance. Many labor unions which support my campaign, many of those fought hard to get good insurance that they may like. And I don't think we want to take that away from folks if they like their insurance. But having an option, I think, is a good opportunity for us to both drive down costs and give folks the coverage that they need.
Congresswoman Stefanik is pro-life. How do you feel about this question in view of the Supreme Court's decision?
Well, right now, we have a serious threat to millions of American women across this nation in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision. Overturning Roe v. Wade immediately put millions of American women across the nation under threat. And what we're seeing is that it's not stopping there, because Congresswoman Stefanik is taking it a step further. She's the highest-ranking Republican in the House of Representatives who is pledging to advance a national ban on abortion. That would target women here in New York. So there is a moment of urgency for us to protect the rights of women. I am committed because women deserve the right to be in control of their own bodies and make their own healthcare decisions without interference from the government. And in Congress, I would pass and codify once and for all into law a woman's right to choose.
The cost of higher education seems to go in only one direction.
Yeah.
And for parents who've got youngsters, what's the answer to the runaway price tag of a college education?
Yeah, we've seen this hockey stick effect of the increased costs for higher education. I'm somebody that also suffers as a result from this, from student loans with the degrees that I've gotten. We need to make sure we're addressing that root cause of those increased rates of higher education by supporting alternatives. We want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to go to community college. Or to the building trades and apprentice programs. College is not the right answer for everyone. We need competition in that marketplace to drive down the cost of higher education. We also need to provide additional assistance for folks, expansion of Pell Grants, folks who can't afford college, to give them the path and the opportunity to get there.
Let me ask you about something that is on everybody's mind, whether they articulate it or not, and that is just the polarization we see in America today. What is the path forward out of this, in your view? How did we get here, and how do we get out of it?
That's a great question. And it's certainly one that is, I think, prevalent in this campaign. As I mentioned, I grew up in a bipartisan household.
Yeah.
Dad's the Democrat, mom's the Republican. And when I grew up, politics didn't take over everything. We came together on shared values. And what I've seen over time, and there are a number of different reasons for this, is that we've seen the elevation of these voices on the far left and the far right. The extremes have dominated the conversation in our political life. People vote for folks based upon, how good of a Republican they are in combating the Democrats and vice versa. We need to start elevating who are the problem solvers. And we solve problems, I think, from the middle. I think that there's this great moderate majority, most of us who are not interested in the far right and the far left, that feel like we don't have a voice anymore in American political life. And one of the things we've done in this campaign is establish a second line on the ballot. I'm not just running as the Democratic Party candidate, I'm running as the moderate party candidate. This is an opportunity for us to give a voice to the great moderate majority, not just to win an election, but that's where we can govern more effectively, by bringing people together.
Are you a vote for Nancy Pelosi if she runs for Speaker?
I will not support Nancy Pelosi for another term as Speaker. We need to have new leadership in Washington, D.C. I think that there's opportunities for us to restore trust through things like term limits that I would like to see advanced moving forward, but I will not support Nancy Pelosi for another term as Speaker.
When we do hear from Congresswoman Stefanik, press releases often begin, and I would just want to ask you about this, by characterizing you as the, and I quote, the far left downstate Democrat from Poughkeepsie who's never voted in the New York 21. How much of that is true?
Well, we might be here all day to pick apart all of those lies. I was born in Poughkeepsie. I have voted in New York 21. I think the characterization of far left is more a reflection of how far to the right she is to say a centrist and a moderate like me is in the far left. And I live in Glens Falls. I was born and raised in upstate New York. I went to Stewart's for ice cream after my Little League games. Congresswoman Stefanik actually lives outside of the district. I'm the only one who lives inside of the district, and she lives further downstate than I do. So I think she's really the downstate rhino in this race.
Did you move to this district to run?
No, I actually moved here to be closer to family and friends, to return to upstate New York after a career of service to my country, as many people do.
Mr. Castelli, what does this decision for voters come down to?
I think it really comes down to who do they trust to have their interests put up front when any decision is being made down in Washington, D.C. One of the challenges that we've seen, I think, from Congresswoman Stefanik over time is that it's clear she has sold us out in order to advance her own career and left us behind. She sold out veterans by voting against veterans' health benefits like the PACT Act. She sold out women by advancing this national abortion ban. She sold out seniors by pledging to gut Medicare and Social Security, as well as voting against efforts to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. We need somebody that we can have confidence and trust that they're going to put our interests first, our future first, instead of their own. And that's the real challenge in this race. It's one of the opportunities I think we have is to restore public service and get rid of a politician.
Thank you for being with us. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, Stuart.
A footnote. This year, media outlets in many states report trouble with incumbents of both parties who do not want to debate their challengers on the public stage. Perhaps they fear losing votes, making a mistake. But our democracy is the worse for it.